Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show. Welcome to my February 2022 pull list review. I read 76 comic books in February, which is, I think, the most I've read in a single month. Lots of books. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but these are the comic books that I read in that month. So these are more or less in the order in which I read them. So starting off with XMen Volume 3, which contained issues 16 through 20. Young Justice Volume 3, with issues 13 through 20. That's interesting. A book called Milk Teeth. I quote-unquote read it. I'll just throw this in real quick because I'm not going to talk about this any more than this. Milk Teeth was a book that I found on In-Stock Trades that looked real, or the description of it looked really interesting. I liked the cover and I got it, and it was like this little almost square shaped, maybe 4 inches by 4 inches, something like that. And it's really just a collection of static images. So I hesitate to even call it a comic book, but I read it, so to speak. I looked at the pictures. They look nice. Okay. Batman, Superman, number 17. Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 1. I read issues 43 through 50. And then Amazing Spider-Man, I forget the volume, but this is issue 39 from, I want to say, 2002. And then Suicide Squad, what do they call that one? Bad Blood, issues 1 through 11. Giant Days Volume 9, which contain issues 33 through 36. Ms. Marvel Volume 1, No Normal, that first Ms. Marvel volume, issues 1 through 5. Nice House on the Lake, number 3. Infinite Frontier, number 3 and 4. Justice League versus the Legion of Superheroes, number 1. And I won't be talking about that because I'm sure that Peter and I will be talking about it on a future Legion Project podcast episode. All right, more than halfway through. Time Before Time, Volume 1, which contains issues 1 through 5. The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, Volume 1, which is issues 1 through 5 as well. And then for a reread, for an upcoming episode of the Tales of the Legion Project podcast, I reread Legion of Superheroes Millennium 1 and 2, and the first 6 issues of the Suk Bendis Legion of Superheroes. And then I read the Batman Catwoman special, Saga number 55, The Return of Saga, The Marvels number 7 and 8, Serial number 10, the end of that series, the Superman Gallery from, I want to say, the 90s. Anyway, and then finally, The Brave and the Bold, issues 188, 189, 192, and 194. That's a lot, right? Well, maybe not for you, but it's a lot for me. Doing these pull list reviews are becoming more and more interesting as time goes on because I've sort of kind of made a New Year's resolution to read more comic books, and I am doing so. I'm also tweeting about them. If you're following along with me on Twitter with that hashtag my500comic goal. So the more I read, the more I feel like I should talk about here, but I also don't want to edit a bunch of, a really long episodes. So we'll see how this goes. Because there were quite a few of these books that I have things to say about. And I think most of these actually. So anyway, probably a good thing I'm not talking about some of these other books. But to start off with, let's just dive right into X-Men issues 16 through 20. Really the highlight of this volume is issues 18 and especially 19. Issue 18 has Wolverine, the former X-23, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I am not an X-Men aficionado. So, but they referred to her in here as Wolverine or Laura. The other two mutants in the story are Synch and Darwin, whom I have no idea who they are. They're new to me, in other words. Anyway, so these three characters enter this vault they refer to it as the Vault, I think, to investigate the children of the Vault. I think this is in South America they're doing this in. Anyway, time runs differently within the Vault. And over the course of these two stories, this trio spend decades there. There's one point where they talk about the first 50 years that they're in there. And then there's even more time that passes later in the story, or later in those two issues. So they spend decades together surviving and acquiring intel that they're supposed to bring back to Krakoa. And over the course of these decades, Synch and Wolverine developed this relationship, which was very touching, I thought. And a lot of, especially issue 19, which I referred to as the love story issue, is told, well, I think quite a bit of 18 too. It's kind of told from this perspective of Synch and what they're going through, how they're dealing with it, the feelings that he develops for Laura, for Wolverine, and they fell in love. They had a life together in that weird vault timeline situation. But then, of course, they have to get out because they have to deliver the intel to Professor X and Magneto. And I think what's going on is, or at least how I interpret it, is that when they were resurrected for Wolverine, it's like, because as I understand the resurrection thing on Krakoa is that you are resurrected from the last template before you're, I guess whenever they last copied you, I guess. But for some reason, Synch still remembers all this stuff. And so he still feels that connection, that love for Laura that she doesn't any longer. But she does give him a sign because in issue 18, he's looking at her and she says, "What are you looking at?" and pops her claws while she says it, menacingly. And then at the end of 19, when he's looking at her after they're both resurrected, she does the same thing. And he sees that as a hopeful sign. At least that's how I interpret it. So if I've got that wrong, I would love for you to tell me. But either way, I thought it was a really great way to tell a love story, and between these two characters that I really know nothing about. I know of Wolverine, but I have not really read anything with her, and I certainly didn't know Synch. But really, that was a really cool story. And then in issue 20, there's the whole thing with Mystique, and she makes a deal with Xavier and Magneto to if she does something, and I forget now exactly what it was. It has to do with, was it Nimrod? I don't remember now. Anyway, then they would allow her partner. Is it Destiny? Is that the character's name? You could tell how much of an X-Men. How much I know about the X-Men by this rambling. But she makes a deal. So if she does this thing, then they will resurrect her partner. And she fails, and she's crawling out of the resurrection egg, and says, but what about her? And it was wonderfully told in two panels. It's just one panel is just showing Magneto and Xavier just standing there looking at Mystique, and then the next panel, Xavier says, "What about her? How cold? What a bastard Xavier is in this new X-Men. I keep wanting to say universe, but this new era of X-Men. And then at the very end of the story, they Magneto and Xavier go to talk to Moira McTaggart, whom I don't think I've seen since I read House of X, Powers of 10, that collection, and what that all entails in terms of the X-Men universe with regarding Moira and her place in it and her role in it. So that's I really am very curious now what happens next. And I need to go find out if we're getting, was there when did Jonathan Hickman stop writing the X-Men? I got to figure that out. I have an idea that X-Men Inferno is what comes next, but I don't know how that would translate into the trade collections I've been reading. So, all right, from Marvel to DC, DC Supergroup Young Justice Volume 3, Warriors and Warlords. So this was the third and final volume of the Bendis written, what did they call it? Wonder Comics line Young Justice series. So, this tied up things that began in the first two trades, and really even before that, in just kind of in the DC universe generally. But then, and I don't know, I felt like this volume kind of floundered, like they weren't sure of what the next big story or direction would be. I'm thinking in particular, maybe this is unfair, but of the issue with the confrontation between Cassie and Zeus, I guess that's her dad. I don't remember now. That was told mostly in prose with some static images. I just kind of felt like they were trying to wrap up some storylines as quickly as possible, because maybe at that point they knew the end was near of the run. So like I said, it was a bit of a messy ending to the series as a whole, but it was nice to see some Mike Grell Warlord art interspersed with in between the Michael Avon Emming art when they were in the Warlord's World. What do they call it? Scarteris. Anyway, regardless, I would love to see more with these characters. So if they wanted to continue a Young Justice, a new Young Justice book, I would gladly read the trade collection, or at least on the DCU app. All right, I guess I'm just bouncing around between. Oh yeah, I am Marvel and DC for a couple more. So I mentioned I read Amazing Spider-Man number 39. This was part of the Nuff Said initiative, editorial direction, whatever you want to call it. I got an idea to do something with silent issues, silent comic book storytelling. And while researching how many there have been, because I thought of two. There's a Batman story that I remember specifically, and I thought there was another one in my collection, but I couldn't actually find it or remember exactly what it was. I just had this idea that there was one. But while I was researching what silent issues there were, I came across this reference to this particular Amazing Spider-Man issue. And this was from 2002. And so I pulled this from the description of the trade collection of this Nuff Said stuff. So it says here, Marvel President Bill Jemas and Editor-in-Chief Joe Quesada hatched a test for the mighty Marvel maestros. Since you're the best artists and writers in the biz, we challenge you to tell a story using visuals only. And so that's what this is. So I read this on the Marvel Unlimited app. This story, I thought, when focused on Aunt May, as part of it really took advantage of the idea of the silence in terms of the actual storytelling that's going on in the use of text. So email, May has a to-do list that she's marking off as she goes along in the story. And also to highlight the split between her and Peter that was going on at that time. One of the things on her to-do list is to try to forgive Peter, I think it said, something along those lines. However, when Spider-Man is out and about doing his Spider-Man thing, I think that silent plot device breaks down just a little bit, or more, maybe even more than just a little bit. But it pulled me out of it to see him fighting the bad guys and not doing his usual quippy thing. So I didn't think that was I didn't think that was as successful as the rest of the issue. And there's also a great opening with Mary Jane as she's getting ready by herself. I think either in another state or another country. I don't know. But she sees Spider-Man on television, and you could tell that she's sad. Apparently, there's some issues going on between Peter and Mary Jane and Aunt May that I know very little about it. I'll just put it that way, but I know something's going on. Anyway, I have not read much Spider-Man from that time period. And so it was kind of nice to see something a little new, but it's old, but it's new to me, and playing with some things that are a little different. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. All right, back to DC. Suicide Squad: Bad Blood. This trade, this hardcover that I got, collects the 11 issues of that run by Redondo and Taylor. And what fun! What fun this was! And this is probably the most fun I've ever had reading a Suicide Squad comic. It changes a bunch of the mainstays of the Suicide Squad. Waller's no longer in charge. This new guy is worse. Two major and I'll say loved or beloved characters are killed in this run. I really want to say, I have in my notes, I was going to say it, but I'm not going to, just in case you've not read this. And we get an all new set of characters that are introduced here, called the Revolutionaries. And they basically take over the book. So they supplant the Suicide Squatters in their own book. So this was a big swing for Redondo and Taylor to do this kind of stuff. And man, if I'd been reading this issue to issue and then found out that they canceled it and ended that what was set up in those 11 issues, I would have been pissed. Fortunately, coming into it as I did, I knew it was done. But I got the collection. I even got the hardcover. I wasn't waiting for a trade because I'd heard, the buzz on the internet and people I know who were talking about it. And so I got this, and man, if I had only been reading this series, well, aside from the fact that I would have been pissed that it got canceled, but if I'd only been reading this series before the Redondo and Taylor moved over to do Nightwing, I would have jumped on Nightwing immediately instead of waiting as I did and then having to now go back and pay extra for the issues that I've been trying to get. I only have one left to get. Well, two if I count the very first issue. I want the main cover, damn it. Anyway, this was a lot of fun. This is really good. I enjoyed this a lot. It changes a lot of things about the Suicide Squad, major things, and I'm thinking, how are they going to get around this, going forward? And more importantly, I want to see more of these characters, the Revolutionaries. Taylor and Redondo just did an awesome job of creating these new characters, and they all have these distinct personalities and their relationships, and it was really great. So if you haven't checked that out, I really recommend it. Next up is not a Marvel book. It is Giant Days, Volume 9, issues 33 through 36. My beloved Giant Days. I've been really lax in getting caught up on Giant Days. I think subconsciously I am trying to savor it by not reading a bunch all at once because I only have, I think, 4 more volumes left. And I just don't want it to end. But what does end in Giant Days Volume 9 is the girls' second year at uni. There's a lot of big changes for them all, and some secrets are revealed, especially for poor Daisy at the end. The very end of this volume is like, what a cliffhanger. If you were reading the trade collections as they were coming out, and you got to that final page, I think it's the final page, of Volume 9, to see what happens with Daisy. I just imagine, if it would have been me, my jaw would have just dropped. It's like, oh no, what's she going to do? And we see a bit more of Ed in this volume. He goes out on for a night of drinking with Esther. And, I've always liked Ed until this volume because, he's dead to me now because of his disparaging comment about my beloved Guinness. But I'll forgive him, I'm sure. Okay, this time I'm going back to Marvel. For Ms. Marvel, Volume 1, No Normal, featuring issues 1 through 5. I've had this trade on my shelf for years, literally years. I don't know why. I never got around to reading it until recently, but I finally did. And I really liked this look at superheroics in the Marvel Universe from the perspective of a young woman and a young woman from a different culture. And I also thought that the art in those first 5 issues, I don't know what it is later. My memory of Ms. Marvel, the artistic rendering of that character and her world is different from this. So I think maybe they changed artists. I could be wrong about that. I don't know. But I really enjoyed how different that art style was with what was coming out in Marvel at that time, and probably even now. It's different for anything I see, on the covers and the very few Marvel comics that I'm actually reading right now, that are current anyway. So I definitely want to read more of this run. I really enjoyed this. I'm going to give it to Madison to see how she likes it as well. All right, next up is a book that is in my top 5 of books that I'm talking about for my February comic books that I read, and that is Time Before Time, Volume 1. So I think this collects 5 issues of that series. And I had gotten this because Declan Shalvey wrote it. And so this is, he's branching out from his artistic endeavors and doing more writing. This is his latest, I think it's his latest endeavor. And so I wanted to get this, it's also an interesting idea. It says here, 2140, to escape a world with no future, many turn to the Syndicate, a criminal organization that, for the right price, will smuggle you back in time to the promise of a better yesterday. Yeah, that's quite a hook. So, how much, if you were living in this world, what time would you want to live in to live out the rest of your days? Like, especially, given the state of affairs of the world today, with the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, global warming. I mean, this is a story for now. It's never been more. This kind of a story has never been more timely. But just from the fantasy aspect of it, when would be a good time to go live? For example, in the story, there is this mother and her teenage son. Early on in the series, is taken back to I think 1980 something. And anyway, they get there. The main character, I think what is his name? Tatsuo. I think that's the one who is explaining this to them. It might have been his partner. Anyway, they're explaining, don't draw attention to yourself. Everything, you just follow the guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. And the kid pipes up and says, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" And there's this beat. And Tatsuo, I think, says, "Wi-Fi isn't invented for another 10 years," or something like that. And the kid melts down. and I thought, wow, even though I've lived, I lived most of my life, without Wi-Fi. And having spent as many years now using it as I do, dependent upon it as I am, it would be so strange to go back to a time that does not have that, or computers, or smartphones, or the recording equipment I'm using right now. Oh wow, it's just a really wonderful thing to just kind of think about. Anyway, but all that really is just window dressing. That is just the setup. That is just the setting. Really, the story is about Tatsuo trying to get out of the Syndicate, but he has to pay back his debt. But he and his partner hatch this plan to basically run away and get away from it all. And then things go a little awry, a little off kilter, as these kind of tales often do. And then you add in a vengeful federal agent and things just get even more complicated in this timey-wimey, complicated adventure. But I love it. I love it. I had ordered this. It'd been sitting on my shelf for a while, and then I saw in the last couple months that Volume 2 was being solicited. So I was like, oh, well, I better decide if I want to get Volume 2. So I grabbed Volume 1 off the shelf and read it, and I'm like, yep, I'm getting Volume 2. This is good. Also good, actually, great, is The Many Deaths of Lila Starr. The one word that jumps to the forefront of my mind when I think about this book is wow. So let me just tell you here what this book is about, if you're not familiar with it. It says here, humanity is on the verge of discovering immortality. As a result, the avatar of death is cast down to Earth to live a mortal life in Mumbai as 20-something Lila Starr. Struggling with her newfound mortality, Lila has found a way to be dropped in the time and place where the creator of immortality will be born. Will Lila take her chance to stop mankind from permanently altering the cycle of life and therefore saving her job? Or will death really become a thing of the past? Now, that is what hooked me. It's written by Ram V., illustrated by Felipe Andrade, with a color assist by Inés Amaro. Anyway, that's what hooked me. And then I read this book. In fact, this book was in the top 5 lists of many people who told me what their top 5 comics of 2021 were. And had I read this in 2021, it would have been in my top 5 for sure. In fact, it probably would have been number 2, maybe number 1. I love this book. It's not just about that. You go into this thinking that this is Death's way of trying to stop immortality from occurring, like I said, to therefore save her job, her position, life and death, that whole cycle. But it becomes so much more than that. I did not expect how uplifting the story would be. This is not a story about death. This is a story about life and how messy and surprising and tragic and wonderful life is. So if you've not read The Many Deaths of Lila Starr, you owe it to yourself to go get this and enjoy it. I hope as much as I did. Out of all these books that I'm talking about, this is definitely the one to get. If you only had to pick one of the things that I'm talking about today, this is the book to read. Oh, and I also liked how we get to see a pantheon of gods, essentially, that are not, your usual European style of gods. So I appreciate that. That's a different take, a different position or perspective. So that was really nice. All right. And then, okay. So, now we are back to DC for the Batman Catwoman special. So this was, John Paul Leon's last, bit of work, before he died. And, they had to delay this issue because he died before he could finish it. And so DC, worked it out to where some other artists came on to assist, getting the rest of the story done, and then they turned the book into I think it's a $10 book. They added to it. They added a couple stories that John Paul Leon drew, as well as some tributes to the artist, and so made it just a real special. It's not just a Batman Catwoman special. It's a celebration of John Paul Leon. The Batman Catwoman part of it it was really cool because it was. Selina Kyle, we get to see Selina Kyle's life story told through the lens of many Christmases over the years. That includes when she was an orphan, as Catwoman, as Batman's partner, and then wife, and then mother to their daughter. All that kind of stuff that Tom King has been playing around with his run on the Batman. comics, and that was nice. That that was a nice story. But it's really, like I said, it's really a celebration of John Paul Leon and his wonderful art. I'm really disappointed that I did not really know who John Paul Leon was until last year. Essentially, turns out I had read other things that he has done over the years. I just didn't realize who he was and how good he was until last year when I read, I think it was when they were, oh boy, no, I don't remember it. When the DCU app launched, there was this, or I think it was when it relaunched as DC Universe Infinite. They had this series of books, basically these, I can't remember the name of it now, but a bunch of stories that had been commissioned but had never been released. And there was one of those that John Paul Leon, a Batman story that John Paul Leon drew, and it is freaking phenomenal. I talked about it on a previous episode. Now it's really bugging me. Okay, I had to look it up. I was way off. It's Let Them Live, Unpublished Tales from the DC Vault. So go check out that particular issue that I mentioned, that Batman issue that John Paul Leon did, because it's otherworldly the way what he could do on the page. So, all right. Speaking of otherworldly, Saga is back. Saga number 55. So here we are, 2+ years later, and Hazel is 3 years older. From when the end of volume 9, issue 54, where her father, hopefully this isn't a spoiler, it's been 2 years, was killed. But Hazel has not, or I guess Hazel has kind of taken on her parents' penchant for getting into trouble. So we follow along with her as she barely escapes the cops, and then dealing with what her mother is now doing. So it's a great story, great continuation. I don't think that Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan have missed a beat in that 2+ year hiatus. And they gave us 44 pages for $2.99, unheard of, right? Today. But, really, just like with John Paul Leon, the celebration here is for Staples' art. She is just otherworldly in her ability to draw such fascinating, interesting, engaging characters and stories. So I noticed that she was listed first in the credits as artist and then Brian K. Vaughan as writer, which as it should be. So I'm sure, Brian K. Vaughan's words had, at least a little bit to do with my enjoyment of the issue as well. But it's really all about just seeing what kind of wonderfulness that Staples can produce for us. So, jump back on the Saga train if you haven't already. All right, the penultimate books I will be talking about, the Marvels 7 through 8. I've not been all that keen on this series, even though it's by Busick. But I will say, these issues turn the series around a little bit for me because we get a bit more of a plot momentum, and even to the point where we get to the point in the story here. I think it was in issue 7 or maybe it was 8, where the series started, and from issue 1 we saw a little thing that is depicted how we got there and what it is in one of these issues. So we get that. So we getting the connection. We're getting the, like I said, a little bit more of a plot movement of the plot is what I want to say. And we have some action scenes, actually, finally some action scenes, and not just, real quick little action scenes with people mostly talking. Plus, I love the designs for both the Vision in this. There's a point where the Vision gets his uniform on, his costume on, and he looks really alien. He's got this long collar that stretches up because his neck is really long. And he's got this bald head, and there's like this light emanating from within his collar that illuminates his face from underneath. That's really cool. So I really commend the artist, the color artist on this book for that. And then there, if you just go look at the Marvels issue number 8 cover by Alex Ross, and you get to see the Warbird character here, I love her look. And issue 8 also is her origin story. She is of Wakandan and Shi'ar descent. Get a little bit more on her. I really am wondering though where this whole thing is going. And also, interesting, I mentioned that I read Batman Superman number 17. I enjoyed that, but, there wasn't really much there for me to talk about. Just more continuation of the story. Nothing major happened there. But what I noticed here between Marvel's number 8, I think, and Batman Superman is that there is a film motif in a scene in the Marvel's number 8. And I just found it really serendipitous that Batman Superman are also using it, but much more integral to the story itself. In the Marvels, it's really just kind of almost a flippant kind of, I'm looking at film here, as if the film is showing the reality that we are reading, in the pages of the book. So it's like, they're trying to be a little meta with the film thing. Which I don't know if that works really well, but it does work really well in Batman Superman because it's more, like I said, it's more integral to the overall story. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting that we got between the two companies, they're playing around the same thing in their books. All right, finally, I'm ending with an ending. Serial number 10. We get the final confrontation between Zoe and Jenny, which I thought ended satisfactorily. Jenny gets her comeuppance, although Zoe is pretty badly wounded, but that was from last issue, I think. Anyway, what I liked about this, we got this clash between Zoe and this serial killer lady, Jenny. But along the way, Zoe gets the dog. I talked about the dog before in a previous episode. Zeus. There's a scene in which Zeus comes in and helps to save Zoe, and I just love. I love that Terry Moore has introduced this dog now, and just made me love the dog. And then there's a scene between the cop and Zoe's concerned about the dog. The dog might have to be put down because of what he did, but the cop is like, no, don't worry about it. It was a bear. A bear did this. So it was just sweet that scene between those two characters and the dog. And considering that we have a dog in the Nightwing series, what is in the water that they are using the same things in their books, film strip and dogs, it's just like, what's next? And then last thing on Serial is that Terry leaves it open. There could be a sequel. There's something that happens in there that could expand the story even more if he wanted to. So I guess we'll see what happens next in the Terryverse. Okay, that is all I have for now. I was going to talk about some of the Brave and the Bolds, but I think I'm going to save that for a blog post at the site in the future. I mean, that was my intent anyway. I've now read all of the Brave and the Bold issues that I have in my collection. And, some of those were really interesting and some of them were really wacky. So anyway, keep an eye out for that at the website, longboxreview.com. If you have any comments for me about these books or anything else that I may have mentioned, either in this episode or others, please let me know. You can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. You can also interact with me on Twitter, mostly also Instagram and Facebook if you are inclined to those, at longboxreview. And I would appreciate it if you would share and rate the show on Apple Podcasts. Give me a 5-star review. Who knows? I might even read those. No, I will if you do on the show. But anyway, I would appreciate your support and for spreading the word about the show if you like it, as Chaos and Comics did recently on Twitter. So thank you for that. And with that, I guess I am done. I will leave you. Go read some comics. Thanks for listening. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.